You sure you don't want to start? No, that's fine. Well, so I mean, the energy level, no pun intended, at COP is just building year after year. And notwithstanding the very important issues that are associated with an Africa COP, we're more of a regional utility in the United States. So what I am so enthralled by here at this COP is that people are referring to it as the COP for implementation. And that is genuinely exciting. We've had some monumental accomplishments in the U.S. at the policy level in the past few years. And with all due respect to the considerable work that's involved in achieving those policy outcomes, 3 monumental pieces of legislation, for companies like ours, the work now begins. It doesn't end. I think what I found pleasantly surprising at COP is last year when the U.S. returned, we were embraced. It seemed to be, it's great to have you back. Now some of our candidly developed nation colleagues are saying, it's good to see you, but did you really have to subsidize your industries to the tune of X dollars? And the expression I've used is some of them are wondering, did we poke the bear, and maybe we woke them up and they may be doing some things. But I think it's really all in good-natured, and what we're all in is for a race to the top. I'll talk more about our specific company, but I shouldn't dominate, and I should give Maria a chance, and I'll come back in a moment.
Yeah, sure, we'll come back in a minute.
Thank you, Ralph.
Maria.
Well, what I am seeing here now, first of all, is how much has been increasing in the last 4 years the presence of the private sector at COPI. It's incredible. I mean, and this year it's even bigger than last year, at least the perception, let's say. Also, the indigenous presence, I think it's growing and growing, and being part of the panels, really being able to speak up, to have their voices being listened here. I think another thing is that maybe 4 or 5 years ago at COPI, you would see a lot of presentations, but not a lot of testimonies of good partnerships being put in place. And I think now everybody, first, second, third sector, has already found out that, I mean, by yourself, nobody's going to solve anything. So there are good examples of partnerships being shared here, and I think that they are inspiring. You know, I think that they are actually, in my opinion, they are really the only way to go to speed up the process as much as we can.
So Maria, I'll pick up on that. You know, you did mention that you're impressed by how much more of a voice we have from the indigenous peoples. And I know you have been particularly involved in that in your company. So maybe if you could provide a little bit of a background as to what you're doing, your particular role in the ecosystem that you have, and what you yourself are doing to bring in those voices to the extent that that's an important aspect of what we call a just transition as we move from where we are today to a cleaner, better, and a just and equal world. So any thoughts on that?
Let me introduce myself. So
exactly. Let's start with that.
I am Malu Paiva. I am the Executive Vice President in charge of sustainability at Vale. Vale is one of the largest mining company in the world. We are a Brazilian company, but with a global operation. We are in Brazil, Canada, Indonesia, and many other countries. We produce iron ore and nickel and copper. Okay, we are an extractivist, right, sector. So responsibility, I mean, regarding social and environmental practice is really imperative in order to really to be responsible in the way that you cause impact. So you have to cause as less as possible, but even when you are doing that, you are causing impact, so you have to be very responsible. We are a company with a tragedy on our history, as you mentioned before. And this tragedy was a point of inflection in our life, okay, to happen 3 years ago. I have just 1 year within the company, 1 year and a half, and I have to confess that that was the most difficult career decision I took in my whole life. And I mean, I'm not that young anymore. And why? Because it's not easy to decide to work on a company with such a tragedy in its history. And I was not thinking when I got the call, I said, forget it. I told the headhunter, don't call me again. Okay, I'm not going to join Vale. But then one evening, talking to my husband, he was like, don't you think that maybe you have been working your whole life to be part of such a big company with such a huge impact that is going through a critical moment that needs to transform itself? You know, because what we learned from the tragedy is that it was not enough to think about geotechnical questions only. We have to become a safer company, but a person-centric, a people-centric company. And that would demand a transformation of our culture. It's not only about technical issues only. We have to be safer, but we have to be a better company. To become a better company, not only a better technical, let's say, management, but we have to change a lot. So I decided to join the company because I could be still outside, criticizing, look at it, you know, or join and make part of the transformation. Make what you think that you have learned your whole life to contribute to such a moment. So the company we have as a priority all the reparation of the accidents, and I'm responsible for it. We are working on many different fronts. At the same time, we have to build this future company that's learning how to become a sustainable mining company. From the environmental perspective, we set our goals regarding scope 1, 2, and 3. We are already almost a renewable source. Our source of a power source is almost 100% renewable. It's going to be 100% renewable on a global basis by 25. In Brazil, we already is. We have a lot. We have also reduction goals regarding scope 1, you know. But the biggest challenge is scope 3. Okay, is about partnerships with the steel sector. That's where we have most of our clients. Okay. So how we have to we have to create new products to make them to reduce their emissions, right? And as well, some technologies that we're developing together also on the reduction. But I would say that now the biggest issue, besides the scope 3, that I think that's a huge challenge, it's about the social. And it's not because we are working for the transition to a net zero economy. It's social because it was always social, but we were not paid the attention that was necessary to it. Okay? Last year, Vale decided to commit itself to lift 500,000 people out of extreme poverty. So that's a goal that we have. We have to make it by 2030. So if we were not talking about a net zero economy, these people they are already, you know, in extreme poverty. So we have to face it. And it's clear for us from the business perspective, you cannot go well in a country that does not go well. You know, in the past you could do that, but not anymore.
Right, and I'd like to come back to that in a bit, but what I really was struck by what you said earlier, that you personally had that choice of either staying outside, looking in, you know, sort of holding up the banner saying, you know, things have to change, but you took the decision to come into a company that, let's face it, at that point, perhaps had a very troubled image, and you wanted to work with it on the inside. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about that. But, you know, moving to you, Ralph, you know, in that same context, I'll get back to you, Maria, in a bit. I wonder if you could point to what you have done within the company to do similar things. And as Maria was just saying, that some of the things, such as working with the really poor people, the marginalized people, would likely be done in any case, even if you weren't going to net zero, you know. So in your case, what were some of the drivers to what you did? And what are some of the impacts that you're seeing and maybe split it up a little bit. Is all of that a materiality argument and built into your rate of return and your margins and so forth, or is there some portion of that decision that is slightly different and qualitative?
That's a great question. So, just by way of reminder, the company is Public Service Enterprise Group. It's the parent of Public Service Electric and Gas. It's 115 years old. About 15, 20 years ago, we tried to change the name to get rid of the words public service. We almost had our 15,000 employees all resign at once. So embedded in the culture is this notion of, no, we are an integral part of the community and we are here to serve the public, notwithstanding the fact that we are a publicly traded company. So we have articulated a three-part vision that has as its core a just transition. First part is we want to help our customers use less energy. I've yet to meet a person who wakes up in the morning and says, I can't wait to use a kilowatt hour. They just don't exist. The second part of that vision is that since you cannot conserve and be energy efficient to the point where you use nothing, what we deliver to you has to be cleaner than ever before. And we've always paid attention to that, but in the past that meant not producing fine particulate matter. Now it means not producing carbon dioxide. And lastly, because sadly no one has moved quickly enough, we have to adapt and adjust to the reality of the consequences that we're experiencing with respect to climate change in extreme weather and extended outages, despite the fact that our customers are ever more dependent on our service. So we try to deliver our product more reliably and resiliently than ever before. Now, to recognize the disparity in income levels and the disparity in what this may mean for different groups of people, our energy efficiency efforts are first and foremost targeted at lower income and government entities or public entities that may not be government owned but serve the community at large. A hospital would be an example of that. And we have a regulatory system that allows us to do that and still benefit our shareholders. The second thing we emphasize on the clean solutions is we make sure that the programs that are developed are such that the community can participate as opposed to individual homeowners, because while we don't begrudge individual homeowners from participating, more often than not they tend to be high net worth individuals. And the third and final component is whatever we do, whether it's grid-connected offshore wind, whether it's preserving our nuclear fleet or expanding our energy efficiency programs, we pursue non-traditional employee populations. So we are training people who have not necessarily been an integral part of our workforce in the past. So those are the three things: targeting customers who are in that income bracket, moving towards grid-connected clean solutions, and an employee training program that targets non-traditional employees.
Any, Maria, thoughts from you on, what I'm hearing from Ralph is that there is a culture within the community, within the company, that sort of speaks to serving some of the typically or traditionally underserved communities. In your case, you're talking about how your location and your surrounding communities are important to you. Do you think that kind of thinking is somewhat unique? Or are there general results or general thought processes that you would say is applicable to other companies that are not necessarily in your position? And I'm thinking more also in terms of, what are you hearing around the hallways here as you walk around?
Okay. I don't know if I'm answering your question. You let me know. I work with sustainability since November 2001, when it was not on fashion.
Okay.
Right? I am a psychologist. Before that, I used to work with human resources. And what I see is that society and companies are enlarging their level of consciousness. Okay? And that's something that it will be impossible to get back to previous levels of consciousness. So I think that what Ralph is saying, the way that Vale is now is also working, I think that's something it's demanded from society. It won't be acceptable. It's not acceptable anymore, that you don't have a good engagement, a good understanding of your impact and engagement with your stakeholders. That's something that I don't believe that we will be able to change it. And I think that's not good to change, because I think we are becoming better companies once we start to have this type of engagement and understanding of our impact and expectations of society. I think we have to be very aware that that's going to be changing, evolving, and we need to be really good listeners, good learners, to see what are going to be the next that will be demanded from us. And that's not only about society, that's only about it's also about investors. In our day, it became criteria for your company to be assessed. And I think that there are companies, I always say, I don't know if I will make a good translation, I ask for help. I always say that there are companies that are doing it out of conviction, because their leadership really believes that that's the best way of running, of building a better company. And there are some companies that are doing it out of convenience. That's from outside inside. It's because there is a legislation in place. It's because my competitor is doing it and he's getting some good reputation, so I better do something like that. So, or it's coming from outside to inside or from inside out. But for me, the important is the direction. If it's in the right direction, in the direction of that a responsible company is a better business, is a better investment, is a better neighbor to our communities, then I think that we are in the right direction. And I think that all the companies will have to adhere to this type of movement.
So I'd like to push on that a little bit more, and Ralph, join in, which is, yes, it's good to say, and I think we can agree that changes like these will happen, and one of the necessary conditions is top-level engagement from corporate decision makers. It's a necessary, not necessarily sufficient condition, right? But the question about investor pressure that you put in there, what do you think is the extent of that pressure in terms of how your decisions are made and the hierarchy of drivers towards change? What's your thought there?
I hope I didn't come across before as suggesting that PSEG does these things because we're just benevolent people.
You didn't. You wouldn't be sitting here if you did say
exactly.
that.
So we are focused on earnings growth.
Right.
Now, for many, many years, that earnings growth was build a value chain that goes from the meter to the power plant. And then about 20 years ago, that value chain was truncated from the meter to the substation outside the power plant, and the power plant was removed. So we were fortunate, so to speak. We had an aging infrastructure that needed to be fixed to withstand the climate change-driven weather events that we encountered. Public policy was leading the way in recognizing climate change was real and something needed to be done about it. We were hopefully thoughtful in recognizing that everyone was focused on steel in the ground, and no one was paying attention to thermostats on the wall. And we went to our regulators and said, the cheapest way to solve this problem is help the United States, which is an energy hog, and New Jersey, which is below average in the United States, be more efficient. And the initial response from regulators were, that's not a natural monopoly service. And we said, yeah, you're right, but it's not happening. I can remember Jimmy Carter sitting in front of a fireplace saying we need to conserve energy, and how many decades later we're still an energy hog. So we then worked with our regulators to come up with a system where we produce what I consider to be a quadruple win. We now invest $300 million a year in energy efficiency, but not the way it used to be done, which was a grant program that would give a check to somebody who voluntarily bought more energy efficient equipment. That tended to be people with high net worth and lots of disposable income. Mm-hmm. We said to regulators, if you let us do it, then the environment wins, we'll lower the customer's bill, we'll train people to do the work, Now let's set up the regulatory system where whether we spend $1 on a thermostat or $1 on a transformer, we're indifferent. And we were able to do that. And that's what led to this $300 million a year program. Now, candidly, transformers are more expensive than thermostats. But if you're return focused as opposed to scale focused, you create this quadruple win. So that was a huge motive. It began with public policy saying we need to do this. And then we said, okay, if that's the direction of public policy, how can we help them do that smarter, better, and help a broader customer base?
So that's a nice succinct summary of the need for sort of complementarity in public policy and some of the market drivers. And in your case, you said you also had that need to sort of build off of an aging infrastructure. So of course that's sort of from a corporate perspective. I'm wondering if in the context of Brazil, that these were also sort of similar drivers that came together? Were there other factors that affected your company's journey as you see it?
Well, I started with sustainability in previous jobs. Okay, so at that time when we started, there was no pressure from government, and it was much more out of a vision of a leader. Okay, and it happened for more than a decade in Brazil, that you need to have really a vision of a leader for your company to invest in the necessary changes to become a more sustainable company. Mm-hmm. Okay. In nowadays, I think the pressure of the investors, the pressure of the community, the society in general, of the customers as well, because most of the time in nowadays it's also a criteria for you. Do you have due diligence on human rights? You know, how many grievances do you have in the relationship, regarding the relationship with your community? So it's also, our customers are asking for it. And government is also playing their role. Everything we do on the social side, like I mentioned, we want to contribute to lift 500,000 people out of extreme poverty. We are not going to do it by ourselves. And in order to make it something sustainable, really, on a long run, I do need government. I need to be close to government, because they are the only ones that can universalize it.
Yeah.
Yeah, can I say that?
Yeah. Scale it, universalize it.
Yeah, scale and maintain it.
Yes.
So I do think that we are reaching different levels of coordination, of let's say, harmonization of interests. Because we are talking about different interests, but you have some common goals that you can fix, right? But you made a question that I didn't have the chance to answer.
Yeah, go ahead.
When you asked about how does it go at the company's culture or the company's level, I call myself a biodegradable professional. Okay? I exist to serve, to achieve a mission, and then I have to disappear, because the social and environmental lens, they have to be part of everybody's responsibility. It's not about a department. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, if I look at the executive committee that I belong to today, wow, they are debating, and sometimes they are demanding, sometimes they are even more rigid than I am regarding social issues on the projects that we run, on some areas, on the operations that we run. So, my job is to make sure that everybody takes care and is accountable for. But not everybody is ready. So I have a journey to make sure that it's embedded in all policies, procedures, process, relationships, but more than it, in the culture, in the way of doing things at Vale. And that's only going to be happening if I have the whole executive committee. So who shares today our climate change forum? It's the CEO. Okay, who chairs the sustainable mining forum is the CEO. I have a sustainability community that's run by my colleagues in all the different geographies. So that's the way I have to make sure that it's permeating everything we do, every decision that we make in that company. It's not there yet. It will take some years, but that's how we are approaching it.
So picking up on that, I know the skeptical investor says, given that you're doing all of these things, are you convinced that I'm still getting the same returns or perhaps more returns than if you did not take care of some of these issues? And of course, the argument would be, well, you look at the time frame, right? Maybe in the short term, it's going to be less, but it's going to even out.
It's for me or for Ralph?
Start.
Okay. Yes, I have good ways of showing it. Once you start to invest in the creation, in the empowerment, let's say, of the neighboring communities, they start to depend less on you. They start to build their own plans, their own lives. So not everything that they need will be asked to you. Not every problem that they have that they don't solve with local government, they won't come to me or stop my operation or block the entrance of my mine. Okay, because I can show how much money I lose when they are not living well, right? When you think about circular economy, I can show how much money we are saving, or even the money that we are, profits that we are creating out of our circular economy approach, right? At the same time, it's true, I am investing a lot to change technology, to develop new technologies to reduce our emissions. But that's going to be pay off as well, because that's what my client needs. Okay, I'm not doing out for the blue. I'm working towards the ones that give me, the results every day. So I think I have a good argument to our investors.
Sounds good. Ralph, what do you think?
Well, first of all, I have to give credit to your organization. Ceres, to me, was a pioneer in recognizing the importance of socially conscious investing. Candidly, we were owned about 15% by European investors, and they would ask about sustainability. Okay. That was before sustainability got translated into ESG. So by and large, I'd say that policy led, our company quickly followed, and our investors were laggards in this. Now, what has been attractive to them is profitability, reasonable returns,
sure,
certainly on a risk-adjusted basis, and the expansion of the opportunity set. I don't mean to repeat myself, but before we couldn't earn money by installing LED bulbs and thermostats and efficient heating systems. We couldn't earn money by building offshore wind. And candidly, we used to run the system, the grid, to failure. Now, given our reliance on electricity, it's not okay to run the grid to failure. You better fix it so that it doesn't fail. So climate change, as problematic as it is, has created a whole new opportunity set for us to invest. I do not consider our company an electric and gas company. I consider us an infrastructure company that enables our customers to live their lives the way they want to, with as little economic and physical disruption as we can possibly produce for them.
Good to hear that. And as I listen to you talk, I sort of think, okay, you are, highly reputable, large companies with a good sense of where you stand in the market and where you want to go, in two very large economies that are fairly mature when it comes to investor savvy technologies available, the financial markets, etc. As you roam the hallways here, what do you see? Do you see yourself as being sort of a small group in a select group of countries that are able to operate the way you are, or do you see this kind of thinking and operation more widespread? I'm thinking of some countries where some of the policy infrastructure, some of the financial infrastructure just is not mature. What's your thought? Are they able to do what you're doing, or could they be doing to come up to where you are?
No, so this is the incredible value of COP. So I do think what we're doing has widespread application, but not universal application. And I think there is enormous value for people who pursue a one and only solution to come here and realize that the solutions will vary in time and they vary by location. I'm on the board of a company called TerraPower. I'm a huge believer in small modular reactors. That's not what the mayor of Freetown in Sierra Leone needs to reduce the food insecurity that her citizens feel and reduce the carbon emissions from using charcoal and wood to prepare a meal, right? We should not put a small modular reactor there. They would love LPG. They would love LNG. And yet there's an effort in the United States to limit the construction of natural gas pipelines and LNG facilities. That is insane to me. Because the number one way that my industry reduced carbon emissions over the past 5 years was by replacing coal with natural gas. Even with all of the investments we made in wind and solar, the number one way we reduced carbon was by investing in natural gas instead of coal. So we're working hard to reduce the methane leaks from our gas system. And we are hopeful and not actively engaged that CCUS can play a role for this major consumer benefit called natural gas in the United States. So there are different solutions in different parts of the country, and I fear sometimes that in trying to make one size fit all, everyone should have wind farms, everyone should have solar farms. We miss the opportunity to make progress by making perfection the enemy of the good, if you will.
Okay.
I fully agree with Ralph. There is no solution that fits all. And I mean, inequality is the reality. And I think the reality answers to your question.
Right.
Okay? But, so in one dimension, unfortunately, you still lack maybe some leaders, some good government that put some good policies in place. You need investments. You need really financial resource for some countries. And it's a reality. But in the other side, I was thinking, totally different from your question, but I was remembering, when you are a company, many times you have to cut your budget, right? And I remember that people would come to me and say, I cannot do this or I cannot do that because you cut my budget. And so it's true, we do need investment. But what I learned in my career, that investment runs in one side, and in the other side, you need to have the mentality. You need to have the mindset, because you can also drive a change with very few resources on a long term, because if you have the mindset, you are going to look for them. Right? So I think there are both two different things here. How we make this mindset to become something that really is incorporated, in all the cultures in its own different ways. And then we have the problems of the infrastructure, of investments. That's the inequality that we have to deal today.
So go ahead, Ralph. So I was going to ask then along those lines. So there are things that you've outlined that you can do within the company. There are things that are complement to that, the regulatory, the policy, the availability of finance. What are some of the things that come out of left field and surprise you? And how should we, moving forward, anticipate some of that? How has your thinking evolved, and what would you recommend others
Well, I mean,
look out for?
March of 2020 came out of left field and surprised me. I think it was March 13th when we ceased operations because of COVID. Suddenly the efforts we were making to replace an aging infrastructure, which seemed very efficient economically because we were investing in the bulk power system, suddenly we had to turn our attention to individual lines into the home. But I don't mean to be impolite, but February 24th of 2022, maybe it didn't come out of left field for other people, but it's producing massive dislocations in energy prices, feeding inflation, creating political dislocation, making people wonder, how do we trade off geopolitical stability for the just transition? Can we accelerate energy independence through investing in carbon-free sources? Do we need to do something in the short term that maybe we don't want to do? So there is always something coming out of left field that we have to react to, and those are two big ones that we've experienced.
What I expect, I think I expect more listening in general, okay? I think in order to really build a society, a much better society, not only a better planet, we need to listen more to each other, understand more, have more empathy, understand more about each other's reality, that it will help, so engage really, and that will help us to partner up, right? Governments, civil society, companies, because I think what we need, the scale of change, for me, scale is a huge, huge challenge. Small word, big, big, big challenge. To scale up the necessary change, being on the environmental arena or being on the social, you will need to partner up. You have to come to common agreements. You have to have more open-minded, let's say, relationships or agreements regarding investments and everything else. So for me, it's about we get together. We have to understand each other better. We have to come up with very concrete actions to scale up the change.
So
it's
what do
not
you
enough to come here next year and still show up something very nice that we two did together or we four. How we
Right.
became, 100 on this.
And that's why I was going to follow up and ask you. So, what are you doing now in terms of listening that you perhaps weren't doing 5 years ago or 3 years ago?
Well, I think that's one of our biggest learning at Vale. That we were talking, getting information, but not listening, right? So and coming inside from our employees, how you can really listening on a day-to-day, how you can make a better decision when you really listen, when you make people feel comfortable about speaking up, psychological comfortable. So we are really having a structured approach towards it internally. And externally also, we have teams now that are relating to all different, and we have hundreds of communities that are our neighbors. So structuring, listening on a way that you can really consider them and have them participating on what is possible. I mean, it's not everything, but there are a lot of things that they are now part of, they are listened, they can be really considered in the decision process.
Okay. And Ralph?
If I may, Amit, so we're paying a lot of attention to three things. Number one is that last mile. COVID is going to change in our service territory the way in which people work in the future.
Mm-hmm.
So the home is now a small commercial office, it's a school, and it's a home, all in one. Number two, we want that home to be more energy efficient. So I've talked about that already. This is a wonderful location. We're talking all about renewable electricity here. In the United States, electricity represents 18%, 1/8 of the energy used. If we're going to affect climate change, we cannot stop at electricity until we electrify the economy. So the third area we're focused on is transportation, which is by far in New Jersey the number one source of carbon emissions, and it is by a small margin the number one source of carbon emissions in the United States. So I completely agree with Maria. We need to act on multiple fronts. The only thing the science has gotten wrong about climate change is that the effects of it are happening sooner than we anticipated. Mm-hmm. So those are our three areas of concentration right now.
Excellent. Again, back to the issue of, obviously you've talked a lot about, steps you've taken to listen, to include more voices, to then translate that into specific actions and programs. Moving forward, are there areas beyond the ones you've discussed that you think you'll have to focus on and somehow evolve and change your modus operandi?
One thing Maria mentioned before that's true of us as well. We have pledged to be net zero by 2030. That's going to be relatively easy for us. Scope 3 is our huge challenge, and we are participating with the UN's Race to Zero and the business ambition for 1.5 degrees C. So we are now beginning to look at hydrogen as a way to reduce the carbon intensity of our natural gas, as well as renewable natural gas, in addition to the things I mentioned before, which is additional electrification of the home, as well as energy efficiency. So those two areas are fairly new for us, and to be continued.
Okay.
Well, we have to become an iron ore solutions company, not an iron ore provider, right?
Okay.
Because as Scope 3 is our biggest challenge, I mean, it's really the mindset is already now, okay, how we are going to develop, find a way of getting a even higher quality iron ore. We have a very good one, but how we can improve it even more, we don't know, but looking at it, at the same time to create new products. We have a green briquette, something that we put on the market this year, piloting with many clients where they are reducing already something around 10% of their emissions, and we are talking about the steel sector. That's one of the biggest emissions. So for sure that those commitments, the climate change agenda is changing the way that we do business. The way that we work with our suppliers, because they are demanded to change as well. It's not only about us and our clients, but you are changing the whole value chain. So there is a huge impact, and not only the environmental, but the social as well.
Mm-hmm.
In our days, we have our suppliers also participating, we are looking at their performance on the social side. They are going through all the due diligence regarding human rights, the trainings, etc. So if it does not change your model, it's not for real.
And so when you talk about your supply chain, inevitably the issue comes up about how you make it more secure, more stable. It's a reality that for the most part we do have global supply chain. So within that context, how do you feel for your firm, but in general, how do you feel for your sector? What do you feel is sort of the overwhelming trend, if you may?
There was 2 days of encouraging inflationary numbers that came out of the U.S. That were hopeful. We're now on a sustained path to correct some of the supply chain issues, but you're spot on. Pole top transformers, various pad-mounted transformers that we used to be able to order and get in weeks now take many, many months. The permitting process for some of these larger constructions, whether it's a transmission line or an offshore wind farm, you agree to a price 3, 4, 5 years before, and when you start having inflation at 8 or 9%, and you don't have everything ordered in advance, the margins get compressed very seriously. So these are challenges that we've had to deal with in real time. I'd say the environment is improving, but quite a shock was delivered to the system in the past 2 years.
Okay.
I think we have a challenge on the mining sector. Mining is essential. Everything we are using here has mining on as part of it. I think we have the challenge to show how sustainable the mining sector can be. We are working on a global basis through our global organization. We are working on it, but I think one of our biggest challenges is really to make society understand. We have to become sustainable and making society to understand what it is about, how serious it is.
And for both of you, given the trajectory of your movement, I seem to get the sense that you're hopeful. Any thoughts on how confident you are that you will get from where you are to your stated goals, which will be aligned with sort of the overall needs of this journey?
I haven't changed jobs to become a loser.
All right.
I changed the job to become part of a very complex, I confess, very difficult transformation. But I'm there. I am at Vale because I do believe Vale can become the company that we aim for. A better company, a safer company, people-centric, and well-regarded by our stakeholders.
Love that tone. Ralph?
I get more optimistic every day. I mean, in 2018, we are a large nuclear power generator, We produce 50 terawatt hours of nuclear power. That saves the planet from probably 25 million tons of carbon a year. In 2018, I stood before the New Jersey legislature and said, I have to shut those plants. I am sorry. This is what it means to New Jersey. This is what it means to the planet. And the state saved those plants, but in 3-year increments. And now with the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, all nuclear plants in the United States now have the benefit of at least 8 more years of operation. So the kind of improvements we need to make cannot be made at the same time you're taking massive steps backwards. So to just see the progress we've made in this short period of time is encouraging. Regrettably, it's offset by the impacts being stronger and stronger with each passing day. So I think we've got some great momentum, but there's more work to be done.
Well, good to hear from you, and I think very good message in terms of you really giving us a sense for your journey, where you were, where you're at, and lots of things I think our audience here will be able to take away from. Thank you both.